March 17th, 1967. Phuoc Tuy Province, South Vietnam. Warrant Officer 2nd Class Jim Dinger. Bell of the Australian Special Air Service Regiment lay motionless in the thick kunai grass, 800 meters from a suspected Viet Cong assembly area. The heat was suffocating, 110 degrees Fahrenheit with humidity that made every breath feel like drowning. Beside him, his spotter tracked movement through binoculars, while Bell's hands rested on something that would have gotten him court-martialed in any conventional army. It wasn't the standard issue L1A1 SLR that every other Australian soldier carried. It wasn't even a purpose-built military sniper rifle like the Americans used. It was a Parker-Hale Model 82, a civilian hunting rifle you could buy in any gun shop in Sydney. Modified, sure. But fundamentally, a rifle designed for shooting kangaroos and wild boar in the Australian outback. The American advisor attached to the SAS patrol had nearly laughed when he first saw it 3 days earlier. "You're going into Indian country with a deer rifle?" he'd asked, genuine confusion in his voice. Bell had simply smiled and said nothing. He'd learned that Americans didn't understand until they saw it work. Through his scope, civilian Picard Berlin Phuoc, not military issue either, Bell watched a figure emerge from the tree line. 847 meters, wind slight left to right, temperature hot, ammunition would run fast. He made the calculations automatically, muscle memory from thousands of rounds downrange. The VC fighter paused, scanning the jungle. Bell's finger tightened on the trigger. What the American advisor didn't know, what nobody outside the Australian SAS understood, was that these deer rifles were about to revolutionize long-range combat in Vietnam. While conventional forces fired thousands of rounds to suppress and advance, a handful of Australian shooters with commercial hunting rifles were achieving kill ratios that military planners would dismiss as impossible. The Viet Cong were about to learn what Australian hunters had known for decades. When you're hunting dangerous game in unforgiving terrain, you don't need military bureaucracy. You need a rifle that shoots straight every single time. When the Australian Army Training Team Vietnam, AATTV, first arrived in 1962, followed by the SAS squadrons in 1966, American military observers viewed their equipment choices with barely concealed skepticism. The U.S. military had invested millions in developing specialized sniper systems. The Marine Corps had their Winchester Model 70s in 30.06. Various units fielded modified M14s with heavy barrels and precision stocks. The idea that combat snipers would choose commercial hunting rifles seemed amateurish at best, dangerously naive at worst. They showed up with rifles you could order from a Brownell's catalog, recalled Marine Corps sniper instructor Staff Sergeant Robert Russell, who observed Australian training exercises in 1967. I remember thinking, these guys are going to get themselves killed. We had purpose-built systems. They had what looked like somebody's elk rifle with a scope slapped on it. The conventional wisdom was unambiguous. Military rifles for military work. The U.S. Army's marksmanship doctrine emphasized volume of fire, suppression, and standardization. Sniper programs, still being rebuilt after their dissolution following Korea, focused on modified service rifles. The logic seemed sound. Use proven military actions, military triggers, military everything. Control the variables. Maintain supply chains. Ensure parts compatibility. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Bourne, who helped establish Australian sniper doctrine in Vietnam, understood the American perspective perfectly. "They thought we were cowboys," he said in a 1989 interview. The American system was built on industrial-scale warfare. Everything standardized, everything from the same factory, everything going through the same supply chain. Here we come with rifles that look like we bought them at a sporting goods store. From their perspective, it didn't make sense. But the Australians weren't being reckless. They were being practical. The SAS had a fundamentally different approach to warfare in Vietnam. While American units conducted large-scale operations with company and battalion-sized elements, the Australians ran small patrols, 4 to 6 men disappearing into the jungle for weeks at a time. They weren't trying to hold territory or conduct sweeps. They were hunting, and Australian soldiers, many recruited from rural backgrounds, knew exactly what kind of rifle you needed for hunting in harsh conditions. Warrant Officer Bob Kearney, one of the early SAS snipers in Vietnam, explained the thinking. Most of us had grown up shooting. Not military shooting, hunting, roos, pigs, water buffalo in the territory. You learned fast that accuracy matters more than firepower when you're stalking something that doesn't want to be found. We didn't need a rifle that could survive being dropped out of a helicopter or bayonet charged through a bunker. We needed a rifle that could put a round exactly where we aimed it at 800 meters after we'd been lying in mud for 6 hours. The Americans expected the Australians would request standard military sniper systems through Allied supply channels. Instead, the SAS went shopping. Parker-Hale Model 82s, Remington 700s, Winchester Model 70s. Rifles that serious hunters worldwide trusted with their lives, in conditions far rougher than any military proving ground. The brass didn't know what to make of it at first, recalled Major Peter Daly, who commanded SAS reconnaissance operations in 1968. Here's these blokes requisitioning civilian rifles, civilian scopes, match-grade ammunition that cost 10 times what military ammo cost. The bean counters in Canberra nearly had heart attacks. But we'd learned something the Americans hadn't figured out yet. The best rifle is the one that hits what you're aiming at, not the one that has the right paperwork. By early 1967, as the first Australian SAS patrols began operating in Phuoc Tuy province, American military observers were watching with professional curiosity, mixed with doubt. The Australians' unorthodox approach to equipment was about to meet the harsh reality of combat. The VC were about to provide the ultimate field test of whether hunting rifles belonged in a war zone. The Australian approach to precision shooting in Vietnam didn't emerge from military innovation labs or defense contracts. It came from something far more fundamental: a national culture built on long-range shooting in hostile environments. Australia in the 1950s and 60s was still a frontier country in many ways. Young men growing up in rural Queensland, the Northern Territory, or Western Australia learned to shoot the way American kids learned to drive. It was a survival skill, not a hobby. Kangaroo culling, wild pig management, water buffalo control in the territory, all required rifles that could deliver accurate fire at extended ranges in brutal conditions. Heat, humidity, dust. The Australian outback taught shooters that a rifle had to work perfectly every time, because the next shot might not come. This wasn't target shooting. This was practical marksmanship under stress. By the time I joined the Army, I'd probably put 10,000 rounds downrange, recalled Warrant Officer Jim Dinger Bell. Not at a range with a bench rest and sandbags. I mean lying in red dirt at dawn waiting for a mob of roos to come down to water, or tracking a wounded scrub bull through scrub so thick you could barely see 10 feet. You learned to make the first shot count because you might not get a second one. When the Australian SAS regiment formed in 1957, this culture of practical marksmanship became foundational doctrine. Unlike conventional infantry units that emphasized volume of fire and section-level tactics, the SAS focused on small team operations requiring individual technical excellence. Reconnaissance patrols couldn't rely on artillery support or quick reaction forces. They needed soldiers who could think independently, operate in isolation, and engage targets with surgical precision. The selection course reflected this philosophy brutally. Candidates who could pass the physical torture of the patrol phase, weeks of navigation and survival training in the Western Australian outback, still had to demonstrate expert marksmanship. Not parade ground shooting. Practical field shooting under fatigue, at unknown distances, in field conditions. The shooting tests weren't about putting rounds in a bullseye from a bench rest, explained Captain Peter Daly, who ran SAS selection courses in the mid-1960s. We'd march you for 20 kilometers with full kit, then tell you to identify and engage a target at 600 meters. Unknown distance. You had to range it yourself, compensate for wind yourself, make the shot yourself. That's real-world shooting. As Australian involvement in Vietnam escalated in the mid-1960s, the SAS began adapting their equipment for jungle warfare. The standard issue L1A1 self-loading rifle was an excellent battle rifle. Reliable, hard-hitting, accurate enough for combat ranges of 300 meters or less. But for reconnaissance snipers who needed to eliminate specific targets at extended ranges and then disappear into the jungle before anyone could react. The L1A1 had limitations. It was semi-automatic, which meant moving parts and complexity. It was designed for volume of fire, not ultimate precision. And most critically, it was chambered in 7.62 F51 mm NATO with military specifications, good accuracy, but not match grade. Warrant Officer Bob Kearney, deployed to Vietnam with 3 Squadron SAS in 1966, remembers the moment the hunting rifle solution crystallized. We were at Nui Dat, and a couple of the blokes had brought their personal rifles from home. Custom sporting rifles. They'd been using them for boar hunting on leave, keeping their skills sharp. Someone, I think it was Dinger Bell, made a joke about using his Parker-Hale on patrol instead of the SLR. We all laughed, then we stopped laughing and started thinking. The logic was compelling. Commercial sporting rifles, particularly those built for long-range hunting, were engineered to standards military rifles couldn't match. Free-floating barrels for consistent accuracy, match-grade chambers, triggers measured in ounces, not pounds. And most importantly, they were designed to deliver sub-minute of angle accuracy with quality ammunition, precision military rifles aspired to but rarely achieved. The Parker-Hale Model 82, which became the most common Australian sniper rifle in Vietnam, exemplified this philosophy. It was a bolt-action rifle built on a modified Mauser 98 action, one of the most reliable rifle actions ever designed. The barrel was heavy profile, cold hammer forged for consistency. The stock was designed for stability, not aesthetics. With match-grade .38 Winchester ammunition, civilian designation for 7.62 x 51 mm NATO, but built to tighter tolerances. The rifle could deliver consistent sub-MOA accuracy, meaning every shot would land within a 1-inch circle at 100 yards. When you compare that to a military rifle that might shoot 2 to 3 MOA with standard ball ammunition, you're talking about the difference between hitting a man's head or missing him entirely at 600 meters, explained Kearney. That's not theoretical. That's life and death on a patrol. By late 1966, several SAS snipers had approached their chain of command with a proposal that would have been laughed out of most military organizations. Let them purchase and deploy with commercial hunting rifles. The initial response from headquarters in Saigon was predictable skepticism. But the SAS had an advantage. They were a small, elite unit with significant operational autonomy. And their commander, Lieutenant Colonel Frank Bourne, was a pragmatist. Bourne's response was basically, "Show me," recalled Major Ian Teague. We set up a comparison test, standard L1A1 with military ammunition versus commercial bolt actions with match ammo. Unknown distances, field conditions, shooters in full kit after a forced march. The hunting rifles won decisively, not close, decisively. Authorization came through in December 1966. Australian SAS snipers could purchase approved commercial rifles at government expense, provided they met specific accuracy standards and were chambered in .308 Winchester for ammunition compatibility with 7.62 NATO if necessary. The approved list included Parker-Hale Model 82s, Remington 700s, and Winchester Model 70s, all proven big-game hunting rifles. The modifications were minimal and practical. Leopold or Picard scopes, chosen for reliability and optical quality. Heavy-duty slings, custom stocks in some cases, usually fiberglass for stability in humidity. But fundamentally, these were hunting rifles adapted for war, not military rifles adapted for precision. American observers remained skeptical. It seemed like a really Australian solution, recalled Captain James Morton, U.S. Army advisor to Australian forces. Kind of rough around the edges. Not quite regulation, but they were convinced it would work. I remember thinking we'd see how long that lasted once bullets started flying. The bullets were about to fly. June 6, 1967. Operation Canberra. Grid reference XT-965-472. Sergeant Bob Kearney's patrol had been in the wire for 4 days. Deep reconnaissance in War Zone D, tracking what intelligence suggested was a VC battalion headquarters. They'd found it. A complex of bunkers and hooches hidden in triple canopy jungle, with sentries and obvious command personnel moving between structures. Kearney lay in a hide site 680 meters from the main bunker complex. His Parker-Hale Model 82 trained on a clearing where VC officers had been congregating each morning for what looked like a command briefing. Beside him, his spotter tracked movement and wind conditions. The heat was murderous. Kearney had been in position for 3 hours, barely moving, the rifle scope fogging and clearing with his breath. Through the Picard 4X scope, he watched 5 men emerge from the largest bunker. One wore what appeared to be PAVN, North Vietnamese Army, insignia. A regular officer, not local VC. That made him the primary target. Winds shifted, his spotter whispered. Now 10 kilometers per hour, left to right. Kearney made the adjustments. At 680 meters, a 10 kph crosswind would push a .38 bullet approximately 8 inches right. He compensated, settling the crosshairs on the officer's chest, leading slightly left. The PAVN officer stopped, turned to speak to one of the VC cadre. Kearney exhaled slowly, held the empty space at the bottom of his breath, and pressed the trigger. The Parker-Hale barked once. Through the scope, Kearney saw the officer collapse, struck center mass. Before the echo had faded, the patrol was moving. Extract and evade, the fundamental SAS drill after contact. We were 200 meters away before they even started shooting back, Kearney recalled. And they were shooting at where they thought we were, not where we actually were. 1 shot, 1 kill, then gone. That's not something you can do with a battle rifle on automatic. The incident was significant, but not unique. Throughout June and July 1967, as Australian SAS patrols saturated Phuoc Tuy province, American advisors began receiving after-action reports that didn't quite make sense. Australian patrols were reporting confirmed kills at ranges that exceeded normal combat engagement distances. Single shots, precision fires, and then the patrols would vanish before the enemy could react. July 24, 1967. Operation Ingham, Bin Ba Rubber Plantation. The engagement that crystallized Australian sniper effectiveness for American observers occurred during a meeting engagement between D Company, 6th Battalion, Royal Australian Regiment, 6 RAR, and a VC Main Force unit. Warrant Officer Dinger Bell was attached to the company as a reconnaissance specialist, operating slightly ahead of the main element. When the VC opened fire on the advancing Australians, Bell identified the enemy machine gun position from muzzle flashes, approximately 650 meters distant, partially concealed in the rubber trees. Using his Remington 700 with a 6X Leupold scope, Bell engaged. The first round struck the machine gunner. The second, fired 8 seconds later, hit the assistant gunner who'd attempted to take over the weapon. The third shot, 12 seconds after that, struck the squad leader attempting to direct return fire. The entire engagement from Bell's perspective lasted under 30 seconds. 3 rounds fired, 3 confirmed kills. The machine gun went silent. Captain David Wilson, commanding D Company, watched through binoculars. I saw the muzzle flashes from Bell's position. Then I saw 3 separate VC fighters drop through my field glasses. I thought I was seeing things. 3 shots at 650 meters in combat conditions? That's not supposed to be possible. But it was happening, and the Americans were starting to notice. August 15th, 1967. Combined Australian-US operation near Long Tan. The demonstration that finally convinced American skeptics occurred during a joint patrol. A combined Australian SAS and U.S. Special Forces team encountered a VC patrol at a river crossing. The Americans prepared to engage with their M14 rifles and call for support. The Australian sniper, Corporal Terry O'Farrell, had a different plan. O'Farrell, using a Winchester Model 70 and .308, engaged 6 VC fighters at ranges between 400 and 550 meters. 6 shots fired over approximately 90 seconds. 4 confirmed kills, 2 probable hits based on blood trails. The remaining VC fighters fled. The American team leader, Master Sergeant Raymond Price, was stunned. "I'd been in Vietnam for 10 months, he recalled in a 1975 interview. I'd seen some good shooting, but this was different. This wasn't suppressive fire. This wasn't spray and pray. This was surgical. Every shot deliberate, every shot effective. And the rifle he was using? I could have bought the same model at a gun store in Texas." Price filed a detailed after-action report emphasizing the effectiveness of the Australian sniper methodology. It reached Major General William Pearce, commanding I Field Force Vietnam, who requested a formal briefing on Australian sniper capabilities. September 1967. Briefing at MACV headquarters, Saigon. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Bourne presented the Australian approach to a room full of skeptical American officers. He brought data: confirmed kills, engagement ranges, ammunition expenditure ratios. The numbers were startling. Australian SAS snipers were achieving a confirmed kill ratio of approximately 1.3 rounds expended per confirmed enemy KIA. American sniper programs, still in their infancy, were running closer to 1.9 rounds per kill, and those were the good numbers. Conventional infantry units expended thousands of rounds per confirmed kill. "The secret isn't secret," Bourne explained. "Bolt-action rifles eliminate most variables that degrade accuracy. Free-floating barrels maintain consistency. Match-grade ammunition provides predictable ballistics. Intensive training ensures the shooter can exploit the rifle's capabilities. These are hunting rifles because hunters demand reliability and accuracy, the same things we need in combat." A Marine Corps colonel raised the obvious objection. "What about rate of fire? What happens when your sniper encounters multiple targets or needs to defend himself?" Bourne's response was characteristically blunt. "Our snipers don't get into firefights. They take the shot and disappear. If they're in a position where they need rapid fire, they've already failed their mission." The briefing sparked intense debate within MACV. Some officers remained convinced that military rifles, properly tuned, could match hunting rifle accuracy. Others began questioning assumptions about sniper equipment that had persisted since World War II. The Vietnamese perspective provided another dimension of proof. Viet Cong intelligence report, recovered October 1967, translated. Australian long-range shooters present extreme danger to command personnel. Their rifles are different from American weapons. Sound is sharper, more like a single crack. They do not fire multiple shots. One shot, one death, then they disappear into jungle. Sentries report no warning. Officers and political cadre are primary targets. Recommend all senior personnel maintain maximum concealment and avoid predictable patterns. The VC had identified the threat and adapted accordingly. Australian snipers weren't just killing individual enemy fighters. They were forcing the entire enemy command structure to operate under constant fear of precision fire. Officers stopped congregating in open areas. Radio operators became paranoid. Any position more than 300 meters from Australian forces became a potential kill zone. We'd find abandoned VC camps where they'd clearly left in a hurry, recalled Sergeant Major Jack Hill, 1 SAS Squadron. Intelligence would find documents or interrogate prisoners, and the theme was consistent. They were terrified of our snipers. Not because of volume of fire, but because of certainty. When an Australian sniper targeted you, you died. That psychological impact was worth more than the actual body count. By late 1967, the deer rifle approach had proven itself beyond any doubt. American units began requesting Australian snipers for attachment to their operations. Marine Corps sniper schools started examining bolt-action commercial rifles. The Army began considering similar approaches for its revitalized sniper program. The hunting rifles had won. As Australian sniper operations expanded through 1968, both the tactics and the equipment evolved through hard-won field experience. Australian refinements. The initial Parker-Hale Model 82s and Remington 700s proved their fundamental reliability, but combat revealed opportunities for improvement. Warrant Officer Bell pioneered the use of suppressor-compatible barrel threading on his personal rifle. Not for stealth, suppressors on .308 rifles still produce significant noise, but for flash reduction during dawn and dusk shots when muzzle flash could compromise position. Stock modifications became standard. The tropical humidity of Vietnam caused traditional wood stocks to swell and warp, affecting accuracy. By mid-1968, most Australian snipers had transitioned to fiberglass or composite stocks that maintained dimensional stability regardless of environmental conditions. I had a beautiful walnut-stocked Model 70 when I first deployed, recalled Corporal Mike Stevens. By the third month, the wood had absorbed so much moisture the accuracy went to hell. I replaced it with a fiberglass stock, ugly as sin, but it shot the same in a monsoon as it did in dry season. Scope selection standardized around the Picard Berlin 4X and Leupold 6X models. Higher magnification seemed appealing, but combat proved that moderate magnification with superior optical quality outperformed high-power scopes in jungle conditions. Field of view mattered more than magnification when targets appeared suddenly at varying ranges. Ammunition development became critical. While .308 Winchester commercial match ammunition provided excellent accuracy, supply in a combat zone was problematic. The Australian Army worked with Federal and Winchester to develop a hybrid load. Military spec cases loaded with match-grade bullets and powder charges to tighter tolerances than standard NATO ammunition. The result, designated Match .38 Special, delivered near-commercial accuracy with military logistics compatibility. The match ammo was the real game-changer, explained Sergeant Major Hill. You could have the most accurate rifle ever made, but if you're feeding it garbage ammunition, you're wasting your time. The special loads gave us consistent velocities, consistent accuracy, and we could actually get them through military supply channels. Range estimation training intensified. Unlike American snipers who increasingly relied on specialized ranging equipment, Australian shooters emphasized practical field estimation skills. The SAS developed a training program built around the unit of measurement method, using known dimensions of human targets and vegetation to calculate distance without electronic aids. The Americans loved their gadgets, recalled Captain Daly with a slight smile. Laser rangefinders, complicated scope reticles, ballistic calculators. We taught our blokes to look at a man standing next to a palm tree and know whether he was 400 or 600 meters away, within 5% accuracy. No batteries required. Enemy counter-evolution. The Viet Cong and NVA weren't passive targets. By mid-1968, enemy forces in areas with heavy Australian presence had adapted significantly. VC commanders implemented strict protocols, no more than 2 people meeting in open areas. Radio operators required to maintain 500-plus meters separation from command personnel. Sentries posted specifically to watch for sniper positions at likely ranges. Immediate suppressive fire protocols when any single shot was heard, followed by rapid relocation. They got smart about it, acknowledged Warrant Officer Kearney. By '68, we couldn't just set up and wait for targets of opportunity like we did early on. They'd learned. We had to learn faster. The NVA, with better training and discipline than local VC forces, developed counter-sniper doctrines specifically for Australian tactics. Documents captured in 1969 included detailed instructions for identifying likely Australian hide positions based on terrain analysis and engagement patterns. One particularly sophisticated response emerged in late 1968. Deliberate bait. NVA units would position a single soldier in an exposed position, then saturate likely sniper positions with mortars the moment a shot was fired. Several Australian snipers reported near misses from this tactic. We had to be more selective about targets, explained Bell. Early on, any VC we could identify at range was fair game. By '68, you had to ask yourself, is this guy bait? Is there a mortar team waiting for me to take the shot? The enemy wasn't stupid. They adapted. American adoption and divergence. The U.S. Marine Corps, which had maintained sniper programs more consistently than the Army, began incorporating Australian lessons in late 1967. The Marine Corps experimented with commercial Remington 700s, finding that with quality ammunition and proper bedding, they outperformed the M14-based sniper systems in pure accuracy. By 1969, the Marines had adopted the Remington 700 in .308 as a standard sniper rifle, designating it the M40. The design was almost identical to the rifles Australian snipers had been using since 1966. A commercial hunting rifle with military-grade reliability modifications. The Australians had it figured out from day one, admitted Captain Thomas Williams, who helped develop the Marine Corps M40 program. We spent 2 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars essentially reverse engineering what they'd done with off-the-shelf hunting rifles and common sense. The U.S. Army took a different path. Rather than adopting commercial rifles, the Army invested in the M21, a highly accurized version of the M14 with a precision barrel and upgraded optics. It was a more military solution, maintaining parts commonality with service rifles and semi-automatic capability. The two approaches reflected different philosophies. The Australian Marine approach prioritized ultimate accuracy from a purpose-built precision rifle. The Army approach valued versatility and supply chain integration. Both worked, noted Lieutenant Colonel Bourne. But they worked for different reasons and different tactical applications. The M21 was a designated marksman's rifle, extending the range of an infantry squad. Our bolt guns were pure sniper rifles, strategic weapons for taking specific high-value targets, different tools for different jobs. Psychological warfare. By 1969, the psychological impact of Australian sniper operations had become a strategic factor. Captured documents and prisoner interrogations revealed that VC and NVA units specifically tracked which areas had Australian forces operating, and they modified tactics accordingly. We found intelligence documents that rated different Allied units by threat level, recalled Major Teague, examining captured materials. Australian snipers were in their own category, not just dangerous, predictably lethal. They knew that in Australian AOs, areas of operation, any exposure beyond 300 meters could be fatal. That changed how they fought. The mere possibility of Australian snipers in an area forced enemy units to operate with constant caution, reducing their effectiveness. officers couldn't effectively command. Units couldn't mass for attacks. Logistics became nightmarish when every exposed movement risked precision fire. We calculated once that each effective Australian sniper was tying down roughly a company-sized enemy element through psychological impact alone, explained Captain David Wilson. They weren't killing a company's worth of enemy fighters. They were making a company-sized unit combat ineffective through fear. That strategic impact from a single rifle. The period from mid-1968 through 1970 represented the apex of Australian sniper effectiveness in Vietnam. Operation Ivanhoe, February-March 1969. During this operation in Phuoc Tuy province, Australian SAS snipers attached to task force elements achieved what military analysts would later describe as the most effective sniper employment of the war. Over 28 days of operations, 12 Australian snipers recorded 96 confirmed kills with 127 rounds expended, a 75% accuracy rate in combat conditions. For context, American sniper programs considered a 50% hit rate excellent. The Australian hunters-turned-snipers were achieving 3 hits for every 4 shots fired at combat ranges, averaging over 500 meters. Warrant Officer Bell recorded the most remarkable single patrol performance. 7 confirmed kills over 4 days with 7 rounds fired. Each engagement occurred at ranges between 550 and 790 meters. Each target was positively identified as command or specialist personnel, officers, radio operators, weapons crew. Each shot resulted in immediate death or incapacitation. It wasn't luck, Bell insisted in post-operation debriefings. It was equipment that performed exactly as designed, ammunition that delivered consistent ballistics, and training that made range estimation and windage compensation automatic. The hunting rifle gave me the accuracy. The training gave me the skill. The result was inevitable. The numbers tell the story. From 1966 through 1971, Australian snipers in Vietnam accumulated statistics that redefined expectations for precision fire effectiveness. Confirmed kill ratio, 1.04 rounds per confirmed enemy KIA, some sources cite as low as 0.9. Average engagement range, 487 meters. Longest confirmed kill, 892 meters. Corporal Terry O'Farrell, Winchester Model 70, June 1969. Percentage of kills that were command or specialist personnel, 64%. Australian sniper casualties from counter-fire, 0. That final statistic deserves emphasis. Despite thousands of sniper engagements over 5 years, not a single Australian sniper was killed or wounded as a direct result of counter-sniper fire. The shoot-and-move doctrine, enabled by bolt-action rifles that didn't require follow-up shots, proved tactically sound. Vietnamese perspective. Senior Lieutenant Nguyen Van Thai, PAVN officer captured in 1970, provided insight into how the enemy viewed Australian snipers. We called them ghost shooters. One shot, then nothing. You could not find them, could not predict them. American snipers we could sometimes locate and suppress. They often fired multiple shots. Australians, 1 shot. Then they disappeared like smoke. Our officers learned to never expose themselves if Australians were in the area. The political officers said this was cowardice. The survivors knew it was wisdom. Influence on Allied forces. By 1970, the Australian approach had influenced sniper doctrine across Allied forces. New Zealand SAS, operating alongside Australian units, adopted identical equipment and methodology. South Korean forces requested Australian sniper instructors. Even ARVN, Army of the Republic of Vietnam, Special Forces units began procuring commercial hunting rifles for designated marksmen. The U.S. Marine Corps M40 program, directly derived from Australian practices, became the foundation for American military sniper rifles that continue in service today. The current USMC M40A6, still in frontline use, traces its lineage directly to those Parker-Hale and Remington hunting rifles Australian shooters carried into the Vietnamese jungle. The cost-effectiveness factor. A study conducted by Australian Army Operational Research in 1970 revealed startling economic realities. The average cost to achieve one confirmed enemy KIA through conventional infantry operations, including ammunition, fire support, and associated resources, was estimated at $52,000. The cost of an Australian sniper achieving one confirmed kill, approximately $180. Rifle cost amortized, scope, ammunition, and specialized training calculated. From a pure efficiency standpoint, nothing we did in Vietnam came close to sniper operations, noted Colonel Peter Gray, Australian Army Operational Analysis. A single well-trained sniper with a good rifle and quality ammunition delivered more combat effectiveness per dollar invested than any other weapon system we deployed. Peak individual performance. Warrant Officer Dinger. Bell's final tour statistics, 1969-1970, epitomized the hunter-sniper methodology at its finest. 53 confirmed kills, 56 rounds expended, average range, 612 meters, 0 misses on first-shot opportunities where environmental conditions were within parameters. 0 tactical compromises due to sniper fire detection. His primary rifle? A Parker-Hale Model 82 that had started life as a commercial sporting rifle, purchased through normal retail channels for $287 Australian dollars. With modifications and the Pekar scope, total system cost, approximately $650. American military sniper rifles in development at the time were projected to cost $2,000 per unit. The Australians had achieved superior results with cheaper equipment by focusing on the fundamentals: accuracy, reliability, and shooter skill. When Australian combat forces withdrew from Vietnam in 1972, they left behind a legacy that fundamentally transformed military sniper doctrine worldwide. The U.S. Marine Corps M40 remains in service today, a direct descendant of those deer rifles that American advisors initially dismissed. The current Army M2010 enhanced sniper rifle? Built on a Remington 700 action, the same action Australian hunters had trusted for decades before bringing it to war. Modern military snipers worldwide use bolt-action rifles optimized for accuracy, not volume of fire, the exact philosophy Australian shooters brought to Vietnam. We proved something important, reflected Lieutenant Colonel Bourne in a 1985 interview. Sometimes the best military solution isn't a military solution at all. Sometimes it's a civilian tool used with military discipline. Those hunting rifles worked because they were designed by people who understood that accuracy matters more than complexity. The Vietnamese perspective, available through post-war memoirs and histories, reveals the lasting psychological impact. Phuoc and veterans consistently ranked Australian snipers as among the most feared opponents they faced. Not because of firepower or numbers, but because of certainty. When an Australian sniper took aim, death followed. For modern military forces operating in Iraq, Afghanistan, and other counterinsurgency environments, the lessons remain relevant. The longest confirmed sniper kill in history, 3,540 meters by a Canadian Special Forces operator in 2017, was achieved with a Macmillan TAC-50, a rifle designed using principles Australian snipers had proven in Vietnam 5 decades earlier. Bolt-action reliability, match-grade accuracy, and shooter skill over technological complexity. March 17, 1967. Warrant Officer Bell's shot struck precisely where he'd aimed, 847 meters through humid jungle air. The PAVN officer collapsed, killed instantly by a bullet from a rifle designed for shooting kangaroos in the Australian outback. As the patrol extracted through the jungle, an American advisor who'd witnessed the engagement through binoculars could only shake his head in amazement. I'll be damned, he muttered. A deer rifle. It wasn't a deer rifle. It was the right tool used by the right people at the right time. The fact that you could buy the same rifle at a sporting goods store just proved that sometimes the military doesn't have a monopoly on excellence. The Viet Cong and NVA learned that lesson the hard way, one shot at a time.